Hey marketers, this is the Girls in Marketing podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in today. We are so excited to get started with the episodes. Just before we do, we want to give you a little introduction to who we are and what we do. Girls in Marketing is an e-learning platform and online community. We are on a mission to bridge the digital skills gap and equalise gender seniority in marketing. Right, that's enough chat. Let's get into the episode. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to make a quick mention of Monday.com's annual online conference, The Elevate Show, which is happening on the 3rd of November. The day will be packed with expert talks about how to become super efficient and improve your workflow, as well as lots of product masterclasses, practical customer stories, insights from the Monday.com leadership team, and much more. It's completely free to sign up and attend both virtually and on demand. You can register for free. Just click the link in the show notes of this episode. Hello and welcome back to the Girls in Marketing podcast. I am delighted today to be welcomed by Rebecca Benn. It's so nice to have Rebecca in the studio. I originally met Rebecca back when we had the Social North event in Liverpool. It was quite a few months ago now, but it was a really enjoyable experience. We met, we clicked, and I thought, you know what? She has so much experience. I'll get her on the podcast. She currently works as the head of external comms at Defence Digital, which is a part of the Ministry of Defence. So very excited to welcome her on today and to chat all about professional development, working in the public sector, along with everything else that comes with working in communications. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, it's so wonderful to see you again because obviously we first met at Social North.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's been quite a while, but it's not actually been that long, has it?
It feels like it's been ages. It was lovely to come back to Liverpool. I love the city. I love the vibe. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for inviting me along.
Well, I thought it would. Obviously, you are lovely, so very welcome to have you here. But also, I think we haven't really ever had anyone from like public sector before.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of people talking about public sector, so I thought it would be interesting to chat about that.
Yeah.
But first, I want to go into kind of your background. So you originally have a undergraduate degree in public relations and design management.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that. Where did that kind of initial love for doing that come from? Like, why did you choose your degree? And kind of you've stayed within that sort of realm and industry for the last 16 years. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one because when I started, public relations wasn't really well known. So when I said I'm going to go and do a degree in public relations, a lot of people were very confused by that. My uni, the University of Huddersfield, I think was one of the second universities up north that got accredited by the CIPR. So I decided that I wanted to go into public relations, and I think I touched this on Social North. It was because of a love for Absolutely Fabulous, which was a 90s sitcom for people that don't know it. And although their portrayal of PR was very much a case of people drinking lots of champagne and doing events, what I really liked once I did some investigation was it was like kind of a bit of the best of both worlds. So you had the writing bit, which I absolutely loved. There was a little bit around events, but also was that kind of liaising with newspapers and all of that element of it. So I just thought that'd be really well suited. I was very lucky with my degree. It was so hands-on. We got to do a lot of work around crisis management, a lot of work around broadcasts and how we could really convey messages. So I think I was really lucky on having a course that was really hands-on as opposed to being really theoretical. So when I came into the world of work in comms, I could really hit the ground running.
Yeah, that's nice to hear because I think so many people talk about degrees and how they're quite like not practical at all, like too theoretical, because I think there's a nice balance for a lot of people, but also sometimes not. So it's good to hear that that was good for you. I wonder how much that's changed since then. Obviously, I didn't study a degree at kind of public relations or marketing or anything like that, but I would be interested to know kind of how much that's changed since.
So in terms of degrees, so I went back and I did my master's about now 2 years ago. It feels, I mean, with the pandemic, everything feels like it's been an extended time. And I made the decision to go back and do a master's, mainly because I wanted a different string to my bow. I've been very much public relations, comms centric, and I think having something that kind of gave me qualifications in marketing was really useful. So when I did my master's, I did it at Leeds Beckett.
Okay.
Again, it was more of a theoretical and practical, I think, for this time. And talking to a lot of other students, I think that's the balance that people are trying to get, because you need to have those vital vocational skills. So when you go into the business world, you know what you do. What I liked about my course was the strategic part as well. So it was kind of thinking, and I think with comms in general, and when you kind of move up the management ladder, you really need to be thinking also about the kind of vocational bits, but around that management and being able to talk to other business people. So being able to hold your own in the C-suite. So it's been really important for me to be able to get that strategy piece along with some really practical marketing skills, which kind of equip me for marketing now in, you know, where we are now, because it's changed significantly since when I was at university. I suppose it comes to the point you were mentioning, I think, around making sure that we've got those vocational courses. It doesn't necessarily need to be a degree or something, but you need to make sure that you're up to speed with the latest things that are happening. And like, especially with social media, it changes so quickly. You need to make sure that you know, understand it. And I think part of that is a love for marketing and for comms, and that kind of gives you that impetus to learn a bit more.
Yeah, I think that's what we're all about with Girls in Marketing in particular, is just encouraging people to do that. I think people want to naturally do that, but also sometimes they don't realise the importance of it, especially kind of in, you know, 2022 when so much has changed. But it's interesting actually that you decided to go back and do a master's. What was it about kind of the master's that you did that interested you initially? Because obviously you're saying you wanted to make sure you kind of carried on with that professional development, but what was it about the particular kind of course and maybe the university that, you know, you made you want to go back to and do the master's?
So the university was very simple because it was in Leeds. I live in Leeds, everything's based there. The course itself, it's a very interesting story about the course actually, because there were two courses that I had my eye on. And this one was a digital strategy one, which I thought was absolutely perfect because it was a kind of that digital element of it. But there was a massive exam on one of the modules, and I was like, I can't do exams. I'm terrible. I just won't be able to do it. So I spoke to my other half, and he was like saying to me, right, so this course, you absolutely love it. And I'm like, yep. He said, you think you do really, really well at it? I was like, yep. And the reason you're not going to do it is because of one exam. I was like, yep.
Relatable.
And he was like looking at me in that way that he looks at me as if to say, come on, really? Yeah. And so I was really nervous about doing my master's. I come from a family of academics. Most of my family have degrees, masters, doctorates. So me just having my postgrad, so it's very traditional. So it kind of seemed like a really natural thing to do would be to do a master's. But, you know, I think there are other kind of ways and routes you could go, but for me, I'm very traditional. That's why I went down that route. Yeah. But again, I was really apprehensive about what it would be like going back after like so many years as well. Yeah. But I would say that it was the best decision that I made. It gave me a new sense of confidence in myself in terms of my abilities as a communicator. I met a wonderful group of friends, social media girls. Big shout out to you. They know who they are. And it was just really, really helping to ignite that passion in marketing, which is an area where I never thought that I'd find my home. It's always been very much stuck in public relations, but I think now I've got a real love for marketing too.
Yeah, that's so nice to hear. I think people have a variety of experiences with, you know, undergrads and masters and stuff like that. But I think what is unique in particular is that you did your kind of undergrads in the traditional way, then went off, got all your experience, obviously found a love for everything that you were doing, and then thought, I'm going to go back and kind of reignite that. We get so many people asking us like the best ways to do that, you know, and I think higher education might be the one for everyone. As you said, you don't have to take that traditional route, but it's nice to hear that the traditional route actually worked for you.
Yeah.
It would be great to talk a little bit. So when you graduated university, you started your career actually working in the media relations team at Asda.
Yeah.
So quite different to something that you do now with the public sector. So talk to me a little bit about that experience, what you learned from it, and then we can kind of talk about the kind of transition over to public sector, because there's a lot of people in our community that either work public sector or interested in it, or kind of work public sector, want to get into private sector, or the other way around.
Yeah. So I'd say that, oh gosh, I loved working at Asda. It was a really good foundation, and I would say to anybody that's starting out in comms, working in a press office is so important, because it gives you some real communication skills in terms of being able to talk to journalists, in terms of being able to deal with things at fast pace, in order to just be able to think on your feet and do things differently. So when I worked at Asda, worked in the media relations, I looked after community communications and also local stores, so like kind of all the charity events, and the event coordinators at in store, which was just such a varied job. Like one day we'd be talking about the local football team buying jelly sweets and how it was like their lucky charms, to selling Harry Potter books at £5. So it's just so varied, but it gave me that foundation of being able to think on my feet, being able to talk to journalists confidently, being able to stand my ground. And I was very lucky to have a team of really supportive comms people in that role that helped to nurture me and to help me grow in the kind of comms person that I am now, I'd say. Of my time there, the one person that I will always remember is one of my first managers, Ed Watson, who's such a brilliant communicator, and his flair and style is something that I like kind of remember now, and like sometimes when I'm doing things I do think to myself, well, what would Ed do? even though we've not worked together for so long. So it was great. And when I decided to make the move to public sector, it was around the time where I was looking for something different. I was looking for a different challenge, and I'd always liked the idea of working for the NHS, but not in the traditional comms sense. I didn't really want to work in hospital comms. Nothing against that. It's just not something that I felt drawn to. I've spoken to some friends in those areas, and I just thought, I want to do something that's working still at a national level. So I got the opportunity to work at what was then called the National Programme for IT. So it was all around like kind of this programme for IT, bringing digital capabilities to the NHS. And it was just beginning. And there was a lot of work that needed to be done, engaging with different partners, engaging with stakeholders in the community. And it was just like, perfect. I was like, I've got all of the experience working in the communities at this job. I could really transfer over. But I think the one thing, and a lot of people will say about working in the public sector, that it's really slow paced. And although I would agree that there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy in the work that we do, it is really passionate. It's really great. It is so fast paced. It really is, in terms of the work that we do. And I think that sometimes public sector people get a really bad rap, which I think is really unfair.
Yeah. I think maybe fast-paced in a different way.
Absolutely.
Because people just assume fast-paced means like client deadlines and like being able to do things like, put it on your desk at 9 a.m. on a Monday and being able to do it by like 5 p.m. on the same Monday or something. But I think fast-paced in a different way, in the way of like how you have grown to this position now where you're at. You've been able to get there, like, and I mean 16 years is a long time, but actually you've still got that passion, which is so lovely to like hear. So in terms of the change from private sector to public sector, what are the kind of main differences that you found between the two, other than kind of like the fast-pacedness?
Budget.
Yeah.
Budget. I think that when you're in the private sector, you have to do a lot more with very little. And in doing that, you become very creative. I'd say in terms of that fast-paced piece as well, you've got a lot more stakeholders to deal with, and they are sometimes external and internal as well. So you've got to be able to kind of balance it. I think that's the real trick in terms of when I worked in private sector, and I have like kind of had a couple of different private sector roles over the years. It's really been different because it's around making money. It's marketing for, paid opportunities. And that's something that I think when my second opportunity came when I was working in the private sector again, it was just after I'd had my son. I was very apprehensive about whether I'd be able to bring those skills to bear. So it was a project that I was asked to do when I was on mat leave of all times. My husband, some of his business clients came to see the baby, and they were talking about their marketing plans. And I, being me, was just like, well, why are you doing it that way? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And my husband just looked at me as if to say, I was like, what? And he's like going, you can actually monetize this. You're literally just giving them free information.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, no, they wouldn't want to do that. And he said, would you be interested? So, yeah, I did that for a bit, which was just really interesting for me because I just assumed, I'm public sector, I can't do anything in the private sector anymore because it's like a different kind of set of skills or something. So I was like really lucky for that kind of opportunity. And I think that's kind of thinking about it now, that's something that made me think, oh, maybe if I go back to uni, I can get a bit more skills in there and, work on it. But it's all about transferable skills, I think.
I think that's what people forget as well, the transferable skills. What I thought was funny then that you said is that you automatically just like had that like marketing comms brain. So many people say that. Like I'm the same, but we were talking the other day in the office and we were saying, when you see like something like a paid ad or you see like an out of home and you're like, I wonder, that coffee's good. Or I wonder. And it's so funny that even though you were literally on maternity leave recovering from having a child, you were like, oh yeah, you can do this or you can do that.
Well, I was just thinking, I can't even remember what it was now, but in terms of how they were marketing themselves, I was just like, you're missing a completely different trick because you could do it this way or you could do it that way, and then you get the thing of like, I'll bring the copy over or something like that. It's like my husband, he works in marketing as well, but it's kind of a different niche area. It's more on the software side, so it's more B2B. So from that kind of commercial side, we kind of we do talk about marketing a lot and public relations and, budget wars in terms of sometimes marketing seem to have more spend and, public relations just sometimes feel like a bit of a poor relation in some cases. So it's really good to kind of be able to bounce ideas off with my husband as well.
Yeah, that's nice. My partner doesn't work in marketing. He works in development, so I think like software development. So I think he kind of understands marketing, which is nice to chat about it. But I'm sure you will have got plenty of ideas in the past with your husband as well.
You know what? We do spend so much time talking about things like that. And although he say that, I can't really help you because what we do is completely different. I think with everything, there's those niche bits that do actually, work together well.
Yeah, and crossover as well.
Yeah.
Like I know a lot of people kind of segment things into boxes. We had our internship program recently and I did a piece on kind of brand versus agency and like where do you want to be? And I think that things do cross over, public sector, private sector, brand, agency, it all kind of, you're still doing similar things just in different ways. Yeah. Marketing and digital marketing is very similar across kind of industry and channels. It's just what you have available to you and how you make the most of that.
Absolutely.
I'd love to kind of move on a little bit and talk more about constructing communication strategies because I think you talked a lot in your Social North talk about kind of storytelling and how you love that aspect of it, and people often think that data and communications is quite dry. We had Thierry Nagusagori on, it was quite a few episodes ago now actually, but he is amazing with data and stuff like
love
that.
Him.
And he talks a lot about data and storytelling and stuff, and I love the way you talked about it in Social North. So I'd love to dive in a little bit more about kind of understanding what's important to you with communication strategies and campaigns.
Yeah. So on the data side, I think it kind of didn't really talk about everything that I've done. Just like, so I after working in Connective Health for a while, I moved back into the press office, but this time within like kind of health data.
Okay.
And that's kind of where my love for data came from, because it was seeing the data and being able to use that to tell a story. And the thing is, when you use data to tell a story, it's kind of insight backed. And I think that kind of works in everything that we're doing, is that we need to make sure that any story that we tell is going to resonate with our stakeholders. And the best way to do that is to ask them, or to use that research, or to use that data that's coming in. So if we do a piece of research, or we find out that, you know, people like to hear stories that involve, you know, animals, specifically dogs, which we did. I don't even know how we found out that information. But then we know that if we have any stories that have that kind of angle, which we did in my other job, which was around dog bites, we would then try and package that story together. So we talk about dog bites. We talk about, you know, in terms of ensuring that people are looking after their pets, and showing that they're not, not putting pets in the way of being in that position that they could bite someone. So, in terms of leash, having on the lead, and, working with the dog's home and dog's trust on those kind of stories, which work well. But I think from a data point of view, it is such a untapped resource sometimes. I think if you can scroll through your data, you can find out some really interesting facts and stats, and then, just replay that back to your audiences, because they are really interested.
Yeah, and kind of pulling that out as well to make something of it as well, because sometimes you can look at, like, it's data isn't just like Excel sheets and stuff like that. I mean, it is on the surface, but when you kind of dig deeper and kind of understand that and the reasons behind it, which I always think is really interesting, data isn't something that I've been too exposed to in terms of like comms and stuff like that. But I always find it really interesting how people can kind of pick out certain information within data to create a whole campaign and a whole story around it.
So I think with data, like you said, I think when you're confronted with an Excel spreadsheet, a lot of people will just be like, oh, pivot tables. But I think nowadays there's ways of being able to represent data in a more visual way. And I love the use of like digital tools where you can put your data in, and then you can press a button and you can see where you fare in other areas. And that works really well in terms of the data packages and data work that places like my old place I used to work, NHS Digital, do. So, apps that you can put in your health information to find out your BMI and see where like you are on average with everybody else. That's a really interesting thing, because you can then use that data and say, what am I going to do? So if you look at it and it like says to you, right, you could do with losing some weight. It says, well, how can you do that? What can you could do this by trying to walk some more, trying to do this, trying to do that. So it's just little things that you can do, and you can tick off and go, oh, I can do that, I can do that. But it's that empowerment, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I love that. And I love the fact that data helps to do that. And I think that was one of the things that I loved in my old role, is that use of data was really empowering people to take ownership of themselves and to do things differently. Like Couch to 5K is just a great example of that.
Yeah, I've done that actually. I did it I think it was like maybe a few years ago now. I remember when that came out and it was huge and everyone was like, oh, Couch to 5K. I think I spoke to like my dad at one point and he was like, oh, I'm doing the Couch to 5K. And then that really got him into like running, which is cool. And then now he still does like park runs, and he's not like a massive runner in terms of marathons and stuff, but that like kind of changed the way he like lived his life, which is crazy. And I think that the way that campaign was done and displayed was particularly interesting, because running isn't necessarily something that everyone would say, oh, I'm a runner. I definitely wouldn't say I'm a runner. But like you wouldn't, as a label, there's not a lot of people that would say I am this or I am that, whereas I think that made it a lot more accessible.
Oh, definitely.
So I would be curious to know where that kind of came from, like the data and stuff like that. I'm not sure that you would know that in particular, but
I think that it's kind of NHS Choices at the time was the website that ran it. So they would compile a lot of that data together, and then when Couch to 5K first started, I think this is like when it was NHS Choices, they compiled a lot of data. And then when it was redone again with new voices and everything, so with the original Couch to 5K, there was a lady on there, and like there was like this massive like following for her because of her voice and everything. So everyone says she was really cool. So I can't remember, there's a whole backstory of it. So when it then changed to this package that we now know and love, they used a lot of the data that they got from the first iteration into the next iteration, you know, in terms of, you know, the way it looks and feels. And then I think it's about testing as well, making sure that you're going in, that you're talking to your focus groups, that you're kind of showing them your base idea, getting their feedback, and then making changes to it.
Yeah. What advice then would you give to kind of any brands that are looking to improve or like better their, you know, stories and their data and how they use their data to tell stories? Because I know that there's so many brands that maybe have quite a lot of data, but they don't really know how to display that.
I think it's just, I say the same thing. You've got to start, first of all, with your objective in terms of what it is that you want to do. And I think if you understand as a business, what are those areas that you want to communicate, you can then look for the stories that resonate with those areas. And I think sometimes people get too fixated on one bit or the other bit. And I think it is so easy when you think about, let's say, right, I want to appeal to women and I want to get them to do X, Y, Z. You know, you could then think, right, we should have examples in our business of how that works. I think like kind of in my role at the moment, what we're doing is we're trying to promote the digital, so kind of digital skills, getting more people to come and work for us that have those right skills. And it's like, how can we do that? And, you know, the one thing is to kind of go back, have a look at the data that we've got, look at the people that we've got within our business, you know, that have been with us for maybe 2 years, and then get them to talk about their experiences. So that's kind of that way we're doing that. So it's kind of coming up with the objectives of what we want to do, and then looking within the business of where that data is, and then turning that into the story.
Yeah, that's nice. I think it's nice that people have had that impact and are, you know, going to tell their stories and stuff, because I think that is one way in the public sector in particular that you can really utilise like stories of people. Like I think people relate to people, don't they? So I think if you were to be in that position and you needed something, I think it's always to look to the people who've been impacted most, and in your case it's maybe people who've worked in a position for however many years, whereas sometimes if it was more different types of public sector, you go out and you kind of understand, okay, who's been impacted, like you said, what are our objectives and how can we let them tell their story as well.
A lot of that was, I found it with the pandemic, you know, actually getting people to want to come on, get vaccinated perhaps. It was actually getting those doctors to tell their story in terms of, you know, this amount of people have been vaccinated and this is the impact it's had on our community, or getting community leaders to stand up and say, right, yeah, I think it's really vital that we do this and these are the reasons. And those are the things that you can't buy. You can't, you know, give somebody a script and then get them to read it and go. It has to come from the heart. And I think that where it's been interesting is when we've done campaigns like that, to see the uplift in terms of, you know, uptake is just brilliant. And it's just looking and being able to then have that data that backs up what you did, to say, well, we did this and here's the data that shows, you know, it's had that uplift. So next time we should do that again. Yeah.
That's interesting that you say kind of the difficulty with sometimes getting people on board, because I have actually spoken to people within our community before and they say, not necessarily in the same capacity, but it's so difficult sometimes to get people on board with your ideas or that sort of thing. Is there any advice that you would have for people who maybe are in that position, need people to get on board, even if it's more in a like a customer testimonial point of view, or something more like what you were saying, taking it out and for more of a public sector position?
I think it's a really hard one, getting people on board. I think it's something that I really struggle with sometimes, because like you've got your ideas, and I always kind of freeze up if you've got your idea and then you're trying to sell it to a massive group. And I always think that the best thing you can do is get some allies on side. So talk to maybe one or two people, bounce some ideas with them, to tell them to be really honest with you. And then if you can get buy-in from a couple of people, get buy-in from a couple of more. So when you're doing it to a big place, you know that there are people out there that agreed with you at the starting. So it doesn't feel so daunting. But, you know, I think sometimes we're a bit afraid of failure. You know, some ideas are just not good ones. And that's not a bad thing, because I think having those bad ideas or having those flops help you kind of identify where it went wrong, so next time you can do it better. I think it's really important that we, you know, don't get ourselves in a position where we're always thinking about perfection. I think especially with marketing, sometimes it's just not about perfection. It's about, you know, putting it out there. Sometimes it will work, sometimes it won't. The environment, you know, one thing on one day would just do really well, and then the next day it could be an absolute flop.
Yeah, I think I said that recently, something similar. The fact that, you know, I was talking specifically more about like social media and strategy and stuff. And I think it can get quite disheartening when you put a lot of time into something and then it is a failure. So I think that's why sometimes people don't want to admit to themselves that it was a failure, because they've put so much time and effort into things. But there's been things before that I've tried, you know, strategy-wise, campaign-wise, that haven't done very well, and you've got to sit there. And I think my biggest thing that I've learned is like self-reflection.
Absolutely.
Just reflecting on, not even self-reflection, but just reflection in general, as that, you know, you sit there and you think, okay, what did we do? How can we make that better? And there's always things to improve, even if it is a success. You know, there'll be kind of things in there that maybe could have went better or something like that. And I think the same is with any campaign, any strategy, but people do get themselves down about it, which, you know, isn't the best thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both though, isn't it? Because if you're doing campaigns, if you're doing strategy, evaluation needs to be an important part of that, like, process. You can't do a campaign without doing some evaluation. So I think if you make that part of the process, so you're always doing evaluation, you'll always have that insight in your back pocket. And I think insight is just so important. Can't do a strategy, can't do a plan without insight.
Yeah, I think people forget to do evaluation a lot of the time now, especially people who are kind of maybe one person bands. You know, we have a lot of people in our community that don't have a huge team and they're just on their own, and it's hard to kind of keep up to date with everything that's going on and also do like tracking, reporting, you know, evaluating. So I think it's kind of nice to hear that that's a big thing like within it. But how would you say, maybe if you are someone who doesn't have a massive team, maybe one person on their own or a few people, how would you say is the most effective way to evaluate maybe a campaign or a strategy in a way that doesn't kind of take too long but is still effective?
Yeah, so I'd say that it's important to put a value on evaluation, mainly because that will help you, you know, in terms of being able to celebrate yourself. I think so much, I know when I was doing the work for my husband, I was a one woman band, and actually having that time of reflection and saying, this is what I've done for you, client, and this is how it's looked, and being able to put it all on one page kind of gave myself a bit of a pat on the back as well. I was like, gosh, yeah, this is everything that I've done. But then it also helps you to sell yourself again. So if you've got your evaluation, you can go, right, at the starting of the process, I agreed to get a 20% uplift on your sales. As you can see here, after the process, it's gone up by 40. And then you can use that to say, and if we want to continue this, there are some ideas that I've got, and we could look to maybe do it further. So you use it as a hook to kind of keep the business going, really. I say that's kind of the way to incentivize in doing evaluation. But if you're thinking about it at your objectives time as well, it's important as well. So when you're coming up with the objectives, think in the back of your mind, right, how am I going to demonstrate I've achieved this? Because that's what you want to do. I think for me, I'm very process driven. I like to know that once I finish that campaign, and these are the things that we set out to do, and this is what we did. And also from another point of view, you can use all that information, compile it, pull it in a maybe an award entry, you know, in terms of doing it that way. So it's I know it's hard. Believe me, I realise it's hard, but it's just trying to put a little bit of investment into that.
So I'd love to chat a little bit about the things that you've worked on maybe in the past. You've obviously got a wealth of experience, things that you've worked on in the past that you're particularly proud of, why maybe they were successful to you, what made them successful. Because I think, you know, a lot of people kind of get themselves down when they've been successful or done something. What is something that you've done within your years of experience that you are really proud of and you'd like to share?
I think that I know you keep saying about how many years I've been like working in comms, and it's just so weird when I think about it, like how long I've been there. And I think throughout my career there are like bits that I think about and I'm like, oh, I'm absolutely amazed, you know, really proud of that. I think from my Asda days, really proud of the work that we did at Christmas using data. So there was a story where I worked on, you know, like kind of over Christmas period, we would use that amount of foil, enough foil to wrap around, you know, not the earth, but something like that. Those are the kind of facts. And it was just literally going in, getting those together and pulling all of that data. And that story ended up being on the BBC, which was brilliant, BBC Breakfast News. So it was like really cool, and I got to get to Asda and like kind of work with the team to make sure that they did it. So that was brilliant. I'd say that when I worked for like kind of Connecting for Health or HSCIC, I'd say when I worked back in the press office, there's a bit of a pattern here in terms of press office things. It was really lovely because the data stories that we did were really impactful. We were able to talk about some really important topics. I think I touched on this in the social north thing. So things like self-harm figures that we were able to get, prescribing data. So to be able to get an area where we could talk about the rise in antidepressants. I think being able to look at workforce figures. One of the first stories that I worked on was the rise in female GPs. So that was really interesting. And then I'd say that as my career progressed, I obviously moved up. So it was less around doing the stories and more around coming up with a strategy. So it kind of feels like, in a way, there's less of the actual actively doing things, but more on kind of setting the tone and setting the strategic direction and trying to be hands off and kind of let the team kind of get on with things and being able to be there and more an advisory, this is what you need to be doing. And I think, especially in my role that I'm in now, there's a lot of that I'm doing. So it's kind of directing the team and saying, right, these are the things that we need to be looking at. These are the points we need to be doing, making sure we've got the insight. How can we make sure that we've got the data that we're using and we're effectively putting it to work in the stories and the activities that we're doing. So it kind of feels a bit weird when I think about it, because like when I think through my career, like it's more hands off. I'd say as well, one of the areas of marketing that I am extremely proud of is my company that I had for a couple of years, Really Nice Food. So that came from me wanting to do a bit of branding work, and I was able to pull that together. So think about what I wanted to do. I thought sauces made a lot of sense, created my own sauce, went to market, was able to get a taste award in 2016 for it. So that was kind of from inception, you know, an idea of what I had in my mind of what I wanted to do, brand development, and then, you know, taking it to market. And I would have loved to have carried it on, but I had to swap my sauce baby for my real baby. So it's something that I could always come back to, I think, at a later date.
Yeah. What type of sauce was it?
So it was 3 different types of sauces, 3 hot sauces. So there was a sweet chili one, a barbecue one, and a kind of mango and Scotch bonnet one, which was the one that won the Taste Award.
Yeah. I think my partner would absolutely love that because he loves like hot sauces. I'm not a massive hot sauce fan, but I'd probably try maybe like the sweet chili and the barbecue.
Yeah.
Scotch bonnet does, I'm not sure, because that's quite hot, isn't it?
It is, but do you know what? A lot of people were like, oh, Scotch bonnet's going to be really hot. But I think the thing about Scotch bonnet, it's really fruity.
Yeah.
And then it kind of offsets the mango.
Okay, yeah.
So, you know, do you know what? if you were to have it, but to mix it with a bit of mayonnaise, you'd love it.
Don't knock it till you try it. So just before we finish up, thank you so much for coming on today. I just want to ask you, what piece of advice would you give to yourself if you were just getting started in the industry? You've got all this experience now and you've learned a lot, you've done a lot. What advice would you give to your kind of previous self from, however many years ago?
I'd say that the first bit would be to be bold. I think that it's really important that you set your intentions in terms of what it is that you want, and be curious, be really curious. I think especially now there's so much like avenues and different elements of marketing, and you don't necessarily need to go down the 9-to-5 route. The stuff that you've done, Olivia, is like a real prime example of that, really. I love seeing that people are going down different routes and not maybe going down that traditional route. And, I'd say the main thing is just don't let anybody tell you, what you can and can't do. I think that's really important, is, sometimes it's having that a bit of self-belief that you are worthy and that you are doing a great job. And, seek out cheerleaders, seek out people that will be there to support you, be able to give you advice, be able to bounce ideas off. Like, I've got so many different WhatsApp groups of like comms colleagues that I'll send we all like kind of will put a WhatsApp message in and go, this is what we're looking at doing, what do you think? And we'll just have like a bit of a comms chat about it. And I think that's so important, is to like bring your community together and find your tribes.
That's so nice. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Chatting to you. Right, that marks the end of another great episode. We really hope you enjoyed tuning in today. And if you did, please share with your friends, rate us on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify, and watch the video version on YouTube. We've got so many exciting things coming, so we really love for you to get involved. See you soon.